Ooh, this will be fun. So for this past month, October 2022, I watched one horror movie every single day, adding up to a total of 31 horror movies, and now I'm going to rank all 31 of them. Some were rewatches, some were first-time watches. There were a lot of classic horror movies that I watched for the first time this month, so I thought it'd be interesting to see where those ended up placing on this list. I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm going to. This is just my opinion. We all have our opinions. You guys are going to disagree with this ranking. You are going to dislike the placement of some of these movies. It's bound to happen with this many movies. So just keep that in mind. Be respectful, even if you disagree. Without further ado, let's get into it. Number 31, going to be pissing people off right off the bat, is going to be The Blair Witch Project. Now, I understand why a lot of people who saw this when it first came out have like nostalgia for it, and it blew them away at the time because this had never been done before, and it started the whole found footage subgenre. But me watching it now, as someone who was too young to see it when it first came out, I hated every second of this movie. There's nothing redeeming about it. It wasn't just something that didn't work for me or I found forgettable. I actively hated watching this movie. I don't like found footage, first of all, so that's one point against it already. It made me feel nauseous throughout the entire runtime. The characters sucked. I hated all of them. Couldn't see what was going on a majority of the time. And literally nothing happened. Nothing. Nothing happened in this movie. I didn't feel remotely scared at all, and the ending, there was absolutely no payoff. So I just felt like this is a completely worthless experience that made me feel like I wanted to puke. So for that reason, it is in last. Number 30 is going to be Kill List. Now, I don't know how many of you have seen or heard of this movie. I had it on a list of my phone notes of movies that like I should watch. I don't know why. I think it might have been on like an online list of movies with good twists, or maybe it was recommended by another YouTuber or something. But it was on that list, and I decided to watch it because it looked pretty interesting, and I absolutely hated this movie. There is a twist, and we'll get to that, but the first 80 to 90% of this movie I just found incredibly dull and boring, and they all speak in these accents. It's English, but you can barely understand what the hell they're saying, so you have to put the subtitles on. That was frustrating, and I just didn't get invested into any of it at all. I found it incredibly boring and dull, and then the twist happens, and it takes a complete 180, which makes the movie even worse. Nothing makes any sense anymore, and it's just super bizarre and weird, and I'm like, what the fuck did I just watch? Total waste of time. I would not recommend this to anyone. Kill List is number 30. Number 29 is going to be Halloween Ends. Man, this movie was a massive letdown. You take where the movie ended with Halloween Kills, with Michael killing all those people, killing Laurie's daughter, setting up that he might possibly be supernatural, and you're like, okay, I don't love the supernatural idea, but we'll see where it goes in the next movie. And where does it go? Michael doesn't show up really until the last 10 minutes, and you make the movie about this guy named Corey, who we've never met before, despite the fact that all the marketing was hammering so hard on the point that this is going to be the final confrontation between Laurie and Michael once and for all, and you don't get that at all until the last 10 minutes, and that was okay. It was pretty underwhelming because Michael was barely in the movie. And the Corey stuff, I think it's a somewhat interesting idea on paper, just absolutely the wrong direction to take this final movie in this trilogy, and supposedly the final movie in the Halloween franchise, that was supposed to be about the final confrontation between Laurie and Michael. And then the ending of that so-called character arc for Corey ends really strangely. It makes it feel like the whole thing was pointless, and I don't really understand what they were even trying to say with that character. Like, they do something with him that throws all the nuance out the window, so very, very strange choice. The movie was completely lacking in atmosphere and tension and kills for the most part, which is, you want those things in a Halloween movie. So incredibly disappointing, and I did not like watching this one at all. Number 28 is going to be Terrifier. The second one you will see much higher on this list, but this movie just pissed me off for the most part. There are some cool kills here. The hacksaw kill in particular is absolutely brutal. One of the most memorable kills of all time. Unfortunately, the movie has absolutely nothing else going for it. Character, plot, protagonist, lore, none of that. It is literally just a repetitive gore fest for an hour and 20 minutes. The first 20 minutes is somewhat interesting, but then you quickly figure out that they had absolutely no plot for this one. The person that you thought might be the protagonist, who got any kind of characterization, got killed off like at the halfway point of the movie, and the rest of it is kind of just people showing up to get killed by Art the Clown over and over. And that just, I'm not a fan of torture porn. I'm not a fan of just watching people get killed without any investment in anything whatsoever. That is not what I go to movies for. Number 27 is going to be the Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot, the 2022 one. Good Lord, this movie sucked. There is some decent stuff in here. It's somewhat well made. I like the look of Leatherface. There is some interesting kills. Unfortunately, the main characters are so awful and so stupid that it took me out of the movie at so many different points, and I don't even care anymore. This is all so dumb, and it is pissing me off. On top of that, it doesn't really have any real tension or atmosphere like the first one it did. It doesn't feel like that at all. It just kind of feels like I'm watching these, similar to Terrifier. I feel like I'm just watching these kills happening, and the characters are pissing me off and making really stupid decisions. So at the end, this movie was one that I did not like at all. Number 26 is going to be the Hellraiser 2022 reboot. Now we are getting into movies that are more mixed negative for me, as opposed to movies that I just hated. This one I just found incredibly forgettable. I can't remember anything about any of the characters except the main girl was named Riley. Like, she was decent, I guess. They kind of have a subplot with her that they don't fully explore regarding addiction, and then all the side characters were awful. I just didn't get remotely invested in this movie at all. I dozed off multiple times and had to rewind and see what I missed, and it didn't help or make me any more invested. I do like Jamie Clayton as Pinhead. I like the look of her, and her performance was great. But aside from that, I mean, there's some cool visual stuff in here, but I just had no reason to get invested in any of this, and I found it incredibly dull and forgettable. Number 25 is going to be Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. This is a weird-ass movie. I like that they brought back Kirsty, and she is actually the main character in this one and is the character that you're following throughout the entire movie. I like that we get to see the Hell dimension for the first time, and that we get to see more of Pinhead and the Cenobites. Aside from that, I just didn't really... There was a lot of strange stuff in this movie. It is incredibly convoluted. I found myself quite confused at times, especially once it got to the end. I was like, wait, so what exactly just happened in this movie? And you have the part where all the Cenobites get killed off by this new guy, like, so quickly, like nothing. Like, what the hell was that? Like, these badass characters from the first movie that were so cool, and they get killed off like nothing. Just a very strange decision for this movie to make. And I didn't like that the new Dr. Cenobite at all, and his stupid doctor puns. Just a weird movie that I certainly had a few things going for it, but by the end, I was like, this is just bizarre, and I really have no reason to watch this one. Number 24. Oh boy, I'm going to piss some more people off right now. The Omen, the original one. I'm sorry, this one just did absolutely nothing for me. I think the premise is pretty interesting, and the first kill was really well done, as well as one of the kills later in the movie, which, if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Unfortunately, the movie just goes in a direction for almost the entire second half that I just didn't find interesting at all. This whole investigation plotline, all leading to a reveal that I thought was already obvious. So it's like, all that felt so pointless to me. And Damien, who was supposed to be the main villain, was barely in the second half of the movie. I'm just like, this is really losing me at this point. And the ending, some people think it's cool, but I'm like, yeah, obviously. Like, I knew this the whole time, and not just because... like, it's in the pop culture zeitgeist, and I know because I've watched people review it and stuff, and it's just a well-known thing, but because I felt like the movie made it obvious. So it's like, yeah, this whole investigation didn't do anything for me at all. I don't really understand what was up with the dogs, so it just ended up being a pretty forgettable movie to me, and I didn't even find it remotely scary. So that, for whatever reason, The Omen just didn't do it for me. I understand it's a classic for a lot of people, but not for me. Number 23, speaking of movies that are held up as like the best and scariest horror movies of all time, The Ring. This is another one that did absolutely nothing for me, and I don't really understand the obsession with this one, to be honest. I like the premise, I like the idea, it starts off pretty good. The idea that you can watch this tape and you will die in a week, That's a cool idea. Naomi Watts is great in the lead. She's a great actress. She is not the problem with this movie at all. Unfortunately for me, it just gets less interesting and more convoluted as it goes along, to the point where I just didn't even really care anymore. And I found it completely lacking in atmosphere and tension and scares. Aside from just a couple scenes that kind of stick out, I don't really understand why people call this one of the scariest movies of all time. It confused the hell out of me. I just found it incredibly forgettable and did absolutely nothing for me. So there you have it. Number 22 is going to be Alien versus Predator. This one is perfectly okay. I have enough fun with it. It doesn't do anything to piss me off, but it doesn't do anything to overly excite me or blow me away either. I like seeing aliens and predators fighting each other, and the action, for the most part, delivers. There's some cool stuff, but also some of the action is kind of hard to see, and they don't shoot it very well. And it's also not R. It's rated PG-13. I don't know why you would make that mistake. You take two of the biggest, goriest horror villains and you turn them into PG-13 monsters where you can't see any of the human deaths. Strange choice, but at least you get to see the alien carnage and alien gore, because that doesn't warrant an R rating. So that's cool. I like the mythology and lore. I don't mind the pyramid stuff. I think the pyramid's a cool setting. I am okay with the idea of predators being worshipped by people and breeding aliens so they can train with them. And I'm also okay with the idea of Lex teaming up with a predator. I know a lot of people are pissed about that. I don't love it, but I don't hate it as much as most people seem to. I'm okay with it. I think given the circumstances, it kind of made sense, honestly. And Lex is about the only somewhat interesting character in this movie. All the other characters are completely paper thin and throwaway, and the dialogue sucks. So it certainly could have been a better AVP movie, but it also could have been worse, just like AVPR, which I didn't even bother watching this month because I know how bad it is. Number 21 is going to be The Witch. Another one that a lot of people really love and hold up as one of the best and scariest movies of all time. And another one that just didn't do it for me. There are aspects about this movie that I can respect. I think it is really well made from a technical standpoint. It is really well directed and shot, and the performances are great. On top of that, there just isn't much for me to latch onto with this movie. I didn't really care about any of the characters or the story. There really wasn't that much of a story for a while. It gets compelling towards the end. I'm like, okay, here we go. Then the very end kind of loses me again. So it's a movie that I just felt a bit empty at the end. Man, feels like there was a lot of potential here, but just didn't fully live up to it, because I found most of the movie to be pretty boring, especially considering you can't understand what the hell they're saying half the time. And even when you can, they're just reciting Bible verses. Like, this seems to be a trend with Robert Eggers movies. I hated The Lighthouse. I appreciated this one a lot more, but it seems to be something he likes to do with his dialogue, is just have his characters monologue and like recite Bible verses and stuff like that. That just is not my kind of thing at all. So I'm starting to realize that his movies are just not on my wavelength. I haven't seen The Northman yet, and I probably will at some point, but I'm not expecting much out of it because I just don't think he makes movies that are my kind of thing at all. Number 20 is going to be Cube. This one is incredibly frustrating to me because I really, really dig the premise. I like the idea of putting all these people in this giant cube filled with smaller cubes, and they have to solve these puzzles and try to figure out their way out. That's a really cool idea. It makes for some really interesting and thrilling scenes. Unfortunately, the acting is not good for the most part. I can't really think of any actor that really stood out in this movie. The ending was incredibly disappointing as well, not just because we don't really get any answers, which I'm mixed on that, but also it brings back a character that we thought was dead and certainly should have been dead, and he ruins everything, and I hate when movies do that. It is a trope in movies, and horror movies especially, that really, really pisses me off. So this one could have been great. I like the idea, but the execution ultimately left me feeling pretty underwhelmed. Number 19 is going to be Jeepers Creepers. This is one that is held up as a classic by some people, and some people absolutely hate it. I found myself somewhere in the middle. I think it starts off really compelling. It kind of feels like Joyride a little bit, to where our main characters are being chased and stalked by this unknown person or entity in a truck. That's incredibly thrilling, and I was really engaged in that. Unfortunately, like a lot of these movies I've talked about so far, it got less and less interesting as it went along, ultimately leading to an ending where you see the creeper fully, and he's got like the wings and stuff, and I just found it goofy. I'm like, this looks like something out of a cartoon, like Power Rangers or something. It's not scary at all, and it kind of completely took all of the thrills and mystique away from the movie. And on top of that, they try to do too much with the plot. They have so many ideas they try to shove into this movie, and none of them were fully explored. Like, I don't understand the significance of the song at all, and you got the stuff with the old lady just trying to do too much. They should have stuck to a simple thriller that they set up in the first part of the movie. Number 18 is going to be Predator 2. This is one that went down quite a bit for me in a rewatch. I remember really liking this movie and not understanding the hate. When I watched it again, I now understand why some people are not massive fans of this movie. It's got issues. It is very corny and cheesy at times. Some of the dialogue and acting and line delivery is downright awful. I mean, stuff that'll make you cringe and almost make it seem like a parody at times. It also tries to do too much plot-wise. I really prefer my Predator movies to be simpler. Just give me a predator or multiple predators and give me good characters to follow. Give me atmosphere and tension and thrills. That's all you really need with a Predator movie. You don't have to do all this extra stuff plot-wise, and like with all the cop interactions. I just didn't really find that interesting. However, I still get enough fun out of this movie because the action is cool. I like the idea of seeing the Predator in the urban jungle in the city taking on like gangsters and stuff and cops, and I'd like that he takes King Willie's head. This is possibly my favorite Predator as far as just like the Predator itself in all of these movies. He was totally badass in this one, and I like Danny Glover as a lead character, and I really like the final confrontation between the Predator and Danny Glover's character, especially the end and what happens with all of the other Predators. I thought that was pretty cool, so I get enough fun out of this movie, but it is very, very flawed. Number 17 is going to be the original Hellraiser. I thought this was good, but I'm not nearly as high on it as a lot of people seem to be. I don't quite find it to be the classic that it's held up as. There's a lot to like about this movie. I think that the premise is pretty interesting, even though it's not necessarily exactly what I expected, but I like the themes of like forbidden love and obsession and being willing to do anything for the person you love that are explored in this movie. I think that's well done. I think it is definitely well shot, and of course, once Pinhead and the Cenobite show up at the end, like that's what you were waiting for, and it absolutely delivers.
We'll tear your soul apart.
Unfortunately, I just found myself kind of bored at times, and Kirsty kind of gets shoved in, like shoehorned in as the main character and final girl, even though she was kind of just an afterthought throughout the rest of the movie. So I didn't love that. And then the ending itself, a bit underwhelming. Some of the effects are not very good, and some of the kills earlier in the movie are laughable. On the other hand, some of the effects are great, like the stuff with the chains and the Cenobites themselves. So a movie that's good, but it's mixed positive for me, and I'm not as high on it as a lot of horror fans seem to be. Number 16 is going to be Child's Play. I watched this one for the first time this past month. I went into it expecting not to like it, to think it was stupid, to not buy into it, but I ended up enjoying it quite a bit more than I expected. I still have an issue with the logistics of this tiny little doll, regardless of who he's possessed by, being able to cause all these problems and be this difficult to deal with. But that being said, the idea of a killer doll in and of itself, despite my issue with the logistics of it, is really creepy, and Brad Dourif does a great job. His performance is excellent, and the moment where he reveals himself to the mom is an iconic horror scene.
I said talk to me, damn it, or else I'm gonna throw you in the fire!
You stupid bitch, you filthy slut! Did you fuck with me?
The movie is also quite atmospheric and thrilling, and I also love the idea that kind of one person at a time figures out that, yes, it is actually a doll doing all of these things. And like another person finds out, they don't believe them. Then another person finds out, they don't believe them. It's the type of thing to where you have to see it to believe it. And I love that theme that is present throughout the entire movie. I also really like Andy as a main character. I think he is like adorable and a very likable kid to follow and root for. And his mom is a pretty good character as well. So it also is dated at times, and some of the effects hold up really well. Some certainly don't. Movie that is not great, and it's cheesy, but I definitely enjoy it, and I liked it a lot more than I expected. Number 15, speaking of movies that I liked more than I expected, Terrifier 2. I said I hated the first one. I expressed my problems with it. This movie fixed all of those problems. It gave me so much more to latch onto story-wise. There actually is a story in this one. It's not a super complex one, but at least it has one. It actually gives us character development, and it gives us an awesome, badass final girl to follow and root for. Honestly, Sienna has shot her way up to towards the top of my favorite final girls of all time. I don't know where she would be, top 5 or top 10, but just from this one movie, that's how good and awesome she was in this movie. So that was a big reason I didn't like the first one, is we didn't have anyone, a protagonist to root for, someone to go toe-to-toe with Art the Clown. Now we do. And speaking of Art, you get more of Art, and you get more of what you liked in the first one. So if you're a fan of the first one, they take the gore up a notch, if that's even possible, but they find a way to do it. This movie is absolutely brutal. And the confrontations between Art and Sienna are so good. This is what was sorely missing from the first one. They had in spades in this one. It is certainly a little bit too long. It didn't have to be like 2.5 hours. And the movie also introduces a lot of lore, which I appreciated because the first one was lacking in that. But the problem with that is they raise a ton of questions that they don't even tease or attempt to answer any of them. So that was a bit frustrating. I understand that they're going to do a third one. They're going to hopefully answer the questions in there, but it's just not that's not really a good way to structure a movie where you end it and just a lot of stuff doesn't really make any sense. Things just happen and they're cool and they're potentially interesting ideas, but you don't even remotely begin to explain how any of it works. That was a bit frustrating, but that being said, I really enjoyed this movie. I liked it a lot more than I expected. It fixed all of my issues with the first one, and I would definitely rewatch this quite a bit. Number 14 is going to be The Faculty. I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it is a lot of fun. It knows exactly what it is. And I really like this group of teens. I think of all like the group of teens in horror movies, this is one of my favorite ones. I enjoyed all of those characters and their interactions and the whole dynamic of the group. I really like the premise, the idea that the faculty is getting like possessed or taken over by these aliens, and the kids try to figure out what exactly is going on. I got a ton of enjoyment out of that. It makes for some really interesting scenes. The movie certainly is cheesy at times and does borrow a lot from stuff like The Invasion of the Body Snatchers and The Thing. I noticed quite a few parallels to The Thing, which is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. The movie's cheesy, but it's very fun, and it delivers on what it was going for. Number 13 is going to be Final Destination. I only watched this one this month. I didn't watch any of the sequels. I probably will at some point, but I had a ton of fun with this one. I think the premise is really cool, to where like someone has a premonition about a big event that is going to happen that is going to cause a bunch of deaths, and manages to avoid dying and save a few other people in the process, but death still follows them because they managed to cheat death and they can't escape it, or can they? So the whole movie is trying to figure out whether or not they can escape death. And, you know, if one person cheats death, then does it get passed along to the next person? Who does it get passed along to? I love the exploration of all that. I love how the kills were done in this movie, because it's just like a force of nature doing all these things, and you don't know exactly when or how these people are going to die, but you know that they're going to. I have a lot of fun with that. The movie is pretty cheesy, and the dialogue isn't great. It sometimes acts like it's a little bit deeper than it is. And I also don't think the rules make any sense, really. Like, when you really start to think about it, by the end, you're like, wait a minute, so how exactly does some of this work? Like, once the movie's over, the rules kind of contradict themselves multiple times. But I had a ton of fun with this movie. It delivered the experience that I wanted. Number 12 is going to be Gremlins. This is another first-time watch, and I had quite a bit of fun with it. This is going to be one that I'm going to watch probably yearly now during Halloween or maybe during Christmas, because it is both a Halloween movie and a Christmas movie. It's goofy, but it is a ton of fun. I love Gizmo. He is one of the most adorable creatures ever put to screen. I really like the main character. I think he is a likable and compelling lead. And then the evil gremlins, once they get out into the world and start doing their thing, there is a lot of fun to be had there. They get into these really crazy and hilarious scenarios, like where they're using guns and riding bikes and flying around on ceiling fans and drinking, and they're in the movie theater singing along to Snow White. I just have so much fun with that. And then the ending confrontation I enjoy quite a bit. The evil gremlins are very creepy as well. So you get the contrast between the adorable Gizmo and the creepy-ass evil gremlins. You want Gizmo and the humans to win, and you're having so much fun with the evil gremlins doing all their funny, evil things. Like some of the deaths in this movie, both of humans and of gremlins, are absolutely hilarious. I just enjoyed this movie from start to finish. It is not trying to be like great cinema. It's not trying to be anything mind-blowing. There's like a weird conversation about a girl's dad dying that came out of nowhere. I was like, what the hell was that? But overall, I had a damn good time with this movie, and it is going to become a yearly staple for me. Number 11 is going to be Christine. I have fun with this movie, and I actually enjoyed it a little bit more on rewatch and appreciated it more than I did before. I think the best part of this movie by far is the transformation that Arnie goes through. Going from just like this nerdy kid who certainly is likable, but is also got some issues. And then he ends up becoming a total psychopath by the end of the movie because he gets bullied, and then he gets this car that he becomes obsessed with, and nothing else matters, and it completely destroys his life and his relationships with the people around him. He gets called out by his best friend, played by John Stockwell, who is a great friend to him and is a great friend throughout the entire movie. And he's like, dude, why are you doing this? Like, I love the relationship between those two characters, to where they go from best friends to basically enemies, and you have someone who has always supported him and is now calling him on his shit and has realized just how far he has gone. There's also some really cool kills in this movie. I mean, the car on fire is certainly one of the most iconic shots in like horror history. Like, that's really cool. You know, the fact that the character was running down the middle of the street during that scene does annoy me, and the movie overall does suffer from characters acting really stupid, mostly during the kills with the cars. Like, those were fun to watch, but certainly could have been avoided if the characters had any brains at all, so that did annoy me a little bit. And on top of that, I wish it was a little bit longer. I know that it's already an hour and 50 minutes, which is fairly hefty for a horror movie, but there are certain plot lines that I don't feel like were fully explored. So either cut those out or flesh them out a little bit more. So overall, I enjoy Christine, even though it is certainly not like a all-time great or anything, but it's not trying to be. It's trying to be a fun, entertaining horror movie with a cool premise and good characters, and that's exactly what it is. Cracking the top 10, which surprised the hell out of me, is going to be Smile. I thought this movie was going to be really generic. The trailers looked really stupid. I'm like, what the hell is this? Everyone's smiling. This is going to be really dumb. And then the movie came out, and people were saying really good things about it. I'm like, damn, okay, maybe I should check this out. And I watched it. I'm like, that was incredibly effective and scary. Like, it is legitimately scary. One of the scariest movies I've seen all month. Probably either first or second. There's another one a little bit higher that I'll talk about in a bit. But I thought that it was mostly jump scares, but they were well done jump scares. They weren't cheap ones that didn't have anything to do with anything. They were well set up, well executed jump scares that were actually relevant to the story. There's also some horrifying imagery in here, like stuff that will haunt the hell out of you. I really like the premise of the movie. I guess I don't want to give it away if you haven't seen it, but it's pretty obvious once you start watching it, which is kind of a problem because they spend a lot of the movie on like the investigation, trying to figure out exactly how this works. But like, yeah, we already know. It wasn't that hard to figure out. But I really like the lead character. I think she is a very layered and complex and compelling character. I think Sosie Bacon does a great job in the role. vast majority of this movie really, really worked for me. I was on the edge of my seat. I was legitimately feeling unsettled. Very effective scares, but the very end pissed me off. And if that didn't happen, this movie could have maybe cracked the top 5. That's how good I think most of it was. Unfortunately, they took the easy way out. They took the predictable way with the ending that not only is underwhelming and very uncreative, it also kind of undercuts the messaging of the movie. So that took it down quite a bit, but I still thought it was quite good. Number 9, and this one went up quite a bit for me, is Predators. I don't really understand why I didn't used to be a big fan of this movie, why the hell I had Predator 2 ahead of it, but this is quite good. I had a damn good time with this movie. I really like the idea that predators like grab all these people, all these human predators and human killers, and put them on like this game preserve for the predators to hunt so they can have a good challenge. I really, really like that idea. I think the cast of characters is pretty good. We get a wide, diverse array of personalities. Adrian Brody, who I don't mind him in this movie as much as some people do. I just wish he didn't do the Batman voice. Like, you can be a badass character just with your normal voice. You don't have to try too hard.
This planet is a game preserve. We're the game.
So I was fine with that. I just wish he didn't do the Batman voice. The other characters, like Walton Goggins and Topher Grace, who was shockingly good in this movie. I like the girl. You get Mahershala Ali, a great cast of characters, and they're kind of fighting against these multiple predators. There's the blood feud with the predators, which I'm fine with that. I think I'd still probably prefer when there's only one, and I still like the look of the original Predator. I think the new Predator, the Berserker Predator in this movie, kind of looks like a bug and is not that scary at all. The Lawrence Fishburne plotline was really strange. It slammed on the brakes and completely tanked the pacing and momentum just to get some exposition about how all this stuff works. But most of the movie I quite enjoyed, and the Topher Grace twist I thought was pretty good, and the ending fight was entertaining as well, and there's some clever stuff that like the main character does. So I had a damn good time with this movie, and I also like in the beginning how the characters are kind of slowly figuring out, what the hell is going on and where they are, and it's kind of a mystery to the audience as well when you're watching it for the first time. So Predators went up quite a bit for me on rewatch, and I think it is a damn good Predator movie. Number 8 is going to be the original A Nightmare on Elm Street. I think this one is good. Very good, actually, but I don't quite have it as high as a lot of people do because I have some issues with it. I think that the ending is weird and doesn't really make any sense, but I also saw what Craven wanted the ending to be, and I think that's even worse in a way, so I don't know. But on top of that, the acting is pretty iffy, especially Nancy's mom. Oh my God, she is awful. Literally just like looks like she's reading the lines off the script and not actually like inflecting or having any kind of cadence to anything that she says. Freddy also breaks his rules a couple times in this movie, so there is some frustrating things. But that being said, I still think most of the movie is very effective. I love the premise, the idea that you can get killed by this dead serial killer in your dreams. That is terrifying because with a lot of slasher villains, you can get away from them, you can possibly kill them, you can just not go to Camp Crystal Lake or not go to Haddonfield. But with Freddy, you have to sleep sometime, and he's going to get you when you do. It is inevitable, and that is a uniquely terrifying concept. Freddy himself is, to me, the best slasher villain of all time. He's the only one that people associate with one singular actor in Robert Englund, and they don't think that anyone else can do it. And in this movie, he is very mysterious and dark and scary, which is very effective. I do also like the more quippy Freddy that has more of a personality and has like the one-liners that you get later in the franchise, but I also think that this darker Freddy is incredibly effective for this movie as well. Some of the kills are really well done, especially the first one. Like, that is one of the coolest kills I've ever seen, and the fact that they were able to pull that off at that time is incredible. Great practical effects in this movie. I also love the idea that Freddy tries to make it seem like these people killed themselves, and that's something that he kind of gets away from in the sequels. And I think it's very, very important to the character because, well, there's one killed in this movie. It doesn't really make any sense, but you have to make it look like there's a plausible explanation for why they died so people don't suspect that something weird and supernatural is going on. So Nightmare on Elm Street, the original one, is a classic for a reason, but I don't think it's perfect, and I got a few issues with it, so that's why it's at number 8. Number 7 is going to be Signs. I thought Signs was very effective. I thought Mel Gibson was great in the lead. Joaquin Phoenix is great as his brother. The best part of this movie by far is the characters and the character development and the arc that Mel Gibson's character goes through, to where at the beginning of the movie he had lost his faith, and by the end of the movie it's restored, and there are some great interactions between him and his brother, him and his kids, his brother and his kids, really good dialogue and emotional moments. I was really invested in these characters, which is extremely important to me when I'm watching movies. The alien stuff is almost secondary, and it's not that it wasn't compelling, because it definitely is. Like, that part is never forgotten about throughout the movie, and there's one particular scene where Joaquin Phoenix's character is watching the TV and then the alien shows up, and it's like really, really scary, like scarier than it should be. The aliens themselves, when you get to see them up close and well lit, they look pretty goofy. Like, the CGI, they didn't fully have CGI figured out yet at that time, so I wish they wouldn't have shown so much of the aliens. It was more effective when you couldn't see them that well. And the ending, the water stuff, I'm okay with it. Like, the more I think about it, the more okay with it I am. I don't quite love it, and I feel like it was a bit of an abrupt, underwhelming way to end the alien stuff, but at the same time, it honestly kind of makes sense, and the movie was less about that. So overall, I was very satisfied with Signs. Number 6 is going to be the original Alien. This one is a classic for a reason. It is incredibly effective. Ridley Scott directs the hell out of this movie. It is a masterclass in building tension, and it is super atmospheric to the point where you don't actually see the alien until probably past the halfway point. But up until that point, you're still invested because it's so atmospheric, and you get this feeling that something bad is going to happen. It's so deliberately paced. It's slow, but it's not boring. It is a good slow burn. And then once the alien does actually reveal itself, it is horrifying. One of the coolest and scariest looking creature designs ever put to screen. And then after that point, when the alien starts killing people, the whole rest of the movie is incredibly thrilling. Ripley is a total badass and one of the best final girls of all time. I love like the dynamics of the people on the ship, to where you have like different levels. You have the captain, and then all the way down to like the working men, and the working men are trying to get more out of it and they want to share. I never really picked up on that when I watched it before, but that was an interesting element to the movie that brings it up quite a bit for me. Unfortunately, I don't love this movie quite to the level that most people do, mainly because it doesn't really have that much character development. I like Aliens a lot more because it really fleshes out Ripley as a character, which I'll get to, but this one focuses a lot more on the tension building and the atmosphere than really building out the characters. And on top of that, Lambert annoys the fuck out of me. I can't stand Lambert. She is one of the most annoying movie characters ever, and she brings it down, like, honestly, almost half a point, because especially in the second half of the movie, I just could not stand her. The alien itself, when you see it like in its full form, doesn't age very well. You can tell it's a guy in a suit, which is why I think it's much more effective when you can't see it that well, kind of similar to Jaws. But in a couple scenes, like when he sticks his arms out and he's like walking down the hallway, it takes you out of it a little bit because it doesn't age very well. But overall, the movie is incredibly effective for what it was trying to do. Number 5 is going to be The Exorcist. Wow. There are a lot of movies that I watched for the first time this month that I was quite a bit disappointed in, namely The Omen and The Ring. I was worried going into The Exorcist. I'm like, oh man, is this one not going to work for me either? And it did. It worked like hell. I mean, this movie holds up so damn well and is incredibly effective for a movie that was made almost 50 years ago. I mean, it doesn't seem like that at all. It literally looks like it could have been made today. That's how incredibly well made and incredibly horrifying it is, and how good the practical effects are with like the makeup on this girl and the stuff that comes out of her mouth in this creepy ass voice, these vulgar ass words, is like so shocking. And then you get the physical stuff as well, with like the head turning around and the scene with the crucifix going, where it shouldn't be going. So many great thrills and scares in this movie, and I don't get scared by movies very often. Like, legitimately, I watch a lot of horror movies and I actively seek to get scared. The Exorcist did it, and I totally understand why people call it one of the scariest movies of all time. I think it is incredibly effective, and that whole finale is just super intense. It doesn't let up for even a second. And I think part of the reason that this movie works so well is because they take the time to introduce you to the characters and the relationship between Regan and her mom and get you to care about them before all the bad stuff happens. So that way it's extra tragic and you're extra invested into what's going on. And then the ending is suitably bittersweet. It fits the movie. The only reason it's not higher is I don't think I'll really rewatch this one very often because it is so exhausting. There are some exhausting movies that I will rewatch. This is not one of them, but it is still a great all-time horror movie, and totally get why people call it one of the scariest ever. Number 4 is going to be Predator. I love Predator. I always have. I think part of the reason it's so effective is that you take this badass group of soldiers who are really good at what they do and are so buff, and they destroy this entire guerrilla camp, and you make them completely helpless against this alien creature who is picking them off one by one, like shooting fish in a barrel. Like, it's nothing to this creature. And the Predator itself looks really cool. One of the best creature designs, just like the Xenomorph, right up there with the Xenomorph. And I love all the technology and the fact that it can cloak itself, which makes it extra creepy. Like, the first kill, you can't even really see it. It's just like the shape moving, and boom, the guy's gone. The jungle is a great setting for this movie, and it's a perfect setting for the Predator, and you have this feeling of like, damn, these guys are screwed. How the hell are they going to be able to defeat this thing? And Arnold does it, not by brute force, not by taking it on head-to-head, which most of his guys try to do, but he is smart, and he's learning things and picking things up and observing things throughout the movie that ultimately leads to being able to defeat the Predator. So I love that part of it, and it also is the same thing they do in Prey, which I don't understand why people have a problem with that movie. It is the exact same thing Arnold did. He didn't defeat the Predator because he's buff and because he's Arnold. He tried to take it on hand-to-hand and got his ass kicked. He did it because he outsmarted the Predator, just like in Prey. So Predator is awesome, and I could watch it over and over. It is an all-time action horror sci-fi movie. Number 3 is going to be The Thing. I have always been a massive fan of The Thing ever since I first watched it, but I appreciate it more and more every time I watch it. It's the best of both worlds. You get the physical horror with The Thing itself and the practical effects and the gore, and the practical effects are incredible. They hold up so well, and the movie was made 40 years ago, but it looks like it could have been made today. I mean, you can't find any issues with practical effects, and I don't even understand how they came up with some of the stuff. Like, some of the images that the Thing forms into will stick in your mind forever. And I also love that it doesn't have like one single defined form. Like, every time you see the Thing, it looks different, and they come up with another super creepy design for it. Then you get the psychological part, which is the paranoia that settles into this group of guys once the Thing shows up and is able to impersonate any one of them. So they are accusing each other of being the Thing and are super on edge, and nobody trusts anyone, and they all turn against each other, and they kind of destroy each other within, which is what exactly the Thing had planned. I have my theory on the end, and I'm going to do a full video on that, but so much to love about this movie. The score is so good. I mean, the score won a Razzie? Are you kidding me? The score is incredible and perfectly fits with the bleak vibe of this movie. Kurt Russell is great. I think some of the side characters, the acting isn't amazing, which is like the only issue I have with this movie, but for the most part, everything works about The Thing. Number 2 is going to be Aliens. This is an all-time great movie to me. It has kind of a similar vibe to Predator, to where you take a group of military people who think they're the shit, and then they go up against these alien creatures, and it turns out that they're not the shit. But I like this one just a little bit more because it has better character development, especially Ripley. I mean, she was a badass in the first one, but you learn so much more about her as a person, and she gets much more fleshed out in this movie. You get her relationship with Newt, which is incredibly well done and touching. You get her relationship with Hicks, which I appreciated more on rewatch. I like that dynamic. The other characters, like Hudson, who kind of annoys you and is whiny, but also has heroic moments. And you get the badass woman in Vasquez, and you get Paul Reiser as Burke, who is trying to like make money out of the whole thing. He's the sleazy corporate guy who gets his comeuppance. And then you have Bishop, who I actually really like the dynamic between Ripley and Bishop as well, because in the first Alien, you had the android and Ash and everything that went down there, and now Ripley is basically terrified of androids and doesn't trust them, and you totally understand, but Bishop is a good android, and he ends up showing that by the end, and in Ripley's eyes, redeeming androids. Like, yeah, this one was a good one. So I love that dynamic of the movie as well. The action is great. The aliens look incredible. They age super well. And I actually prefer this version of Xenomorphs to where they're like crawling around as opposed to the more humanoid walking one of the first movie. I know it's a bit of a unpopular opinion, but that's just the way that I feel. And they look super realistic in this one. And what's scary about them is they can be around any corner. They can be above you. And the proximity scanner scenes are incredibly thrilling and will have your heart pounding. The entire second half of this movie just doesn't let up at all and is filled with great action and great thrills. Aliens is an all-timer for me, number 2. Number 1, again, you guys know what it is. It's Seven. Seven is my favorite horror movie of all time. It's my favorite movie of all time. I watch it every year. It is basically a perfect movie. It does everything right. The premise is really interesting and compelling, where you have this crime investigation, where you go to the aftermath of these kills that were done in very unique ways, but you don't actually see them take place. So it's left up to your imagination and let your imagination run wild, which makes it scarier to me because the idea of less is more is executed so well in this one. You get incredible character development with David Mills and William Somerset. Some of the best character development I've ever seen in a singular movie. They have competing ideologies, which makes for some really interesting conversations, and the dialogue is so good. Even the slower scenes is really good at building character, and then once the stuff is happening is super intense and atmospheric, and the score is so good that just reinforces the horror vibe and the bleak feeling and sense of doom and dread throughout the movie. John Doe is a very creepy and eerie villain, and the ending is one of the most shocking endings to any movie ever, especially if you didn't see it coming. The entire last 30 minutes is probably my favorite 30 minutes of every movie ever. The car scene building all the way up to the finale and the box, and then what happens after that, so thrilling and intense. No matter how many times I've seen the movie, my heart is always pounding, and the first time I saw it, I was in absolute shock. That is a feeling that will never be replicated. So Seven is a movie that I don't think will ever be surpassed for me. It is perfect, and it is the best movie I watched this month, and my favorite horror movie and movie of all time. So there you have it, guys. There's my ranking of all 31 horror movies I watched this past month. This is going to be a bitch to edit. I don't know exactly when I'm going to post it, but normally I would ask, like, how do you rank these movies? But I don't know if any of you have seen all these necessarily. This is a very random bunch of movies that I just decided to watch for this month. So I guess just if you have anything to say about my placements or disagree with me or agree with me on certain things, drop a comment below. Let's start a conversation about it. If you like this video, hit the like button. Likes are super important for YouTube channels, getting my videos out to more people and helping it grow. If you enjoy my content in general, subscribe, hit the notification bell, get notified when I post a video. And I got lots more interesting stuff coming, so stay tuned for that. I'll see you soon.